Hi, I'm Wayne Tuttle, and this is Chasing Legends. Welcome back to Chasing Legends. I'm Wayne Tuttle, your host once again. Please hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, leave a comment if you want to leave a comment. Check out our website at www.legendthesuperstitionmountains.com. No, don't need to adjust your screen. It is what it is. I mentioned on our live Friday that the sheep would be shorn, and sure enough, it finally came to pass after several months of me trying to get in. So, we'll go with this look. It'll be much nicer for the summer. So hopefully that doesn't provide a distraction. If it does, I don't know. We're just going to have to get over it. I feel good. Today we have a story that's kind of a story of duality. Two pieces of the puzzle that could fit together or not. We're going to start with the first piece. This is probably people have read it in various accounts. Jacob Waltz, because of something in the desert, and he hadn't had shoes. He would buy shoes for the children in town and so forth because of something that happened. And it's considered something of an urban myth, urban legend story that's just, you don't find it in any actual factual accounts. And there's very little eyewitness material. But there is a story called the Shoemaker's Story. It is that Waltz frequented a shoemaker. He would get his boots repaired by him. And possibly this is where the story of the children and the shoes for the children, perhaps it's a reality. The shoemaker's name was Charles or Charlie, and nobody seems to remember what his last name was. And he worked in Phoenix, knew Waltz. Waltz paid him with gold concentrate. He realized Waltz might have a mine or something. Who knows what Waltz might have said or anything. He felt Waltz was a bit of a dangerous man. Could have been problems for him if he tried to follow him or something. But when Waltz had passed away, Charles or Charlie must have had enough information that he went out figuring he would find Waltz's lost mine. He must have had some information. So he traveled out north of the Salt River into the Four Peaks Wilderness area, up along Cottonwood Creek, Cottonwood Canyon area. He was up in there and then started coming to town to pick up supplies. He basically gave up the shoemaking business and seemed to do okay. He was bringing in some gold concentrate. And then after about a year or two, he just disappeared. They said they didn't know if he'd gotten enough gold and just moved on or if something had happened to him. There's a couple variations. One said he was killed by Apaches, or another said he was chased from the mine by Apaches. There's an author, I'm having to look at a note because the name kind of keeps escaping me, Sperry Weaver. Back in the 60s, Sperry Weaver went to kind of like write up about this, and had actually interviewed several cowboys in the area, and they remembered the shoemaker and said, no, there was a guy out there. They weren't sure if he'd actually found a mine or had gotten some rich float from some couple areas that kept going, had him going on, but they said he eventually took to wandering all over the desert. He was found dead out there from exposure eventually. So there is a very true substance to this, thanks to Sperry Weaver following up that there was a man who had been a shoemaker that had been searching out there for gold. So there's a very good possibility that this could tie into Waltz. The shoemaker had known Waltz that might have had a mine, read the stories in this. What makes this interesting is a gentleman named Colby Thomas. Now, Colby Thomas, in the early 1940s, has a friend. His name's Arataba. He's known as Puncher Bob. He worked as a cattle guy. He's an Apache Indian. And he'd worked as a cattleman for many, many years as a wrangler, and worked on a number of different ranches. Now, at this point, Arataba is 86 years old. And him and Thomas, Colby Thomas, who's 80, are friends. And he goes by one day to see Arataba, who's living with his son. He's 86 and blind. And they're sitting around talking, and Arataba says, look, we both need money. We're old. We can't really work. My son's having a hard time. I can't work. We're poor. Thomas, if you can find a way, I know where there's a mine. And Thomas becomes quite interested. Our Thomas tells him, go out to where the Hughes Ranch is, and it's off what we call the Bumblebee Highway, Bush Highway, and not Bumblebee, Bush Highway. And he says, go out there. When you get to the Hughes Ranch, turn off, go down. When you get to the ranch and you get to the Wash Creek, head up the creek, and in that area, as you go north, there'll be a split, a fork. Take the southerly fork at the well. And he says, after about 5 miles, you'll see some diggings on one side of the wash. When you find these diggings, go up on the bench above, get up out of the wash, go on the bench, look around for the biggest Palo Verde tree. It's sizably much bigger than any tree in the area. Go to that, and about 20 feet southwest, you're going to find an opening. There's a big boulder on it, but you'll find it. And he gives them very, very specific instructions. So Colby Thomas says, okay, goes out. He's 80 years old, but he goes out, drives out, gets to the ranch, goes, hikes up there. He finds the diggings area. He finds where people have been digging. When he's going through there, he's sampling through the washes, and he finds some pretty rich gold float through there. So he's thinking there is a good possibility. There's some mines or a mine up back in here. So he gets up on the bench. He looks around. There's all kinds of Palo Verde trees, but he says they're all about the same size. And he spends pretty much an entire day just searching that whole bench area and everywhere around, looking for any Palo Verde tree or a stump that could lead him to that spot. Finds nothing. Goes back, camps by the well. Next day goes back out. He spends 3 days working this bench in the entire area. Cannot find a Palo Verde tree that fits that or a stump. Cannot find a large boulder. It has possibly a hole under it. So he goes back to Artaba and tells him, because he's living in Mason, says, look, I looked everywhere. Artaba's like, you're in the right spot. It's up there. And then he clues him in what happened. Artaba says his dad had told him, now Artaba's 86. He said about 100 years before, and this is early 40s, say 43, 44, but 100 years before, 2 men had come up from Tucson. And these men from Tucson had found this mine. And they started working it up there by that Palo Verde tree. They cleaned a lot of gold out. They packed up because it was Apache area, and then they kind of got out of there, went to Tucson. The Apaches realized kind of what was going on, knew the gold was bad business for them, what it could lead to. So basically what they do is they cover up the area, they burn and put a lot of ash around and stuff. They put a huge boulder and kind of plug it up and kind of keep an eye on it. The 2 men return from Tucson to check on the mine again. When they come back up, the Apaches actually kill them and dispose of them so that nobody will know where this mine is. And that's a done story. Artaba says his dad and uncles had shown him where this mine was. And out of curiosity, knowing where it was, he decided to go out and dig around the boulder, and using some leverage, got the boulder to move enough, he was able to squeeze in. He said he got down in there and broke off some pieces. He said he was able to get a couple good chunks, had a lot of gold in them. When he got back, you know, he's just a kid. He thought that was really cool, showed some friends, but one of the friends told someone else, and then, of course, his father and his uncles found out he'd been there. They told him it was a very, very bad thing he'd done. They said, you never should go back there. It's literally, they threatened him and told him, you cannot go back there and never again reveal this place to anyone. And he took it very serious and said the rest of his life he never did anything with it. So Colby Thomas, hearing this story, realizes, okay, there's a backstory to it. These 2 gentlemen had found it. Okay, I'll go back out. He gets a guy named Ed Abbott, and he tells Ed Abbott, man, I'm just too old to keep going out there and doing this. Ed's considerably younger. So Ed goes out, and Ed searches the area, and he keeps looking and keeps looking. The float's there in the area. He's like, absolutely, there's obviously something somewhere. But Ed checks the same thing, and it's the same problem. The Palo Verdes, he can't find a boulder, can't find anything, and it could just be time and place, and just, it's been forever and a day. Not much time goes on after that, and Colby Thomas does try to get several people to go out and stay interested in it, but it just kind of fades out. Colby Thomas dies in 1952 at 89 years old, and leaves this story behind, pretty well-known story. Never ever able to find it. It's an interesting tale because both are placed in generally the similar areas. One is definitely queued to Waltz. The other has two people coming up from Tucson, southern Arizona, though it does say they were killed. And in another story, it's said that there could be possible attachment to the Peraltas in the area. There were Peraltas in the area. And it has, like, I believe it's kind of an embellishment to make it more like the Dutchman story. What I found is an old gentleman I met named Brett Bauer had ore, and I've talked about the fact that he said the ore he had was from the Four Peaks area. It was the Dutchman ore, and it was someone his father had known, and he had this ore, and it was sitting there. And I looked at it, and I didn't see a lot of gold content, nothing really in it. The guy struck me. I'm sorry I didn't take a couple pieces. He offered them to me. It was just laying under a tarp. There was just a big pile of just raw rock, and it had been mined from somewhere, and it was just under a big canvas tarp. I peeled it back, checking for scorpions and snakes. I didn't take a sample, but I always thought, wow, that story distinctively also plays with this, because he said it was up in that area, the Four Peaks and Cottonwood Canyon, Cottonwood Creek. And it's kind of interesting. You got the Apache story, got the covered mine, all these different elements. Some of the Waltz stories say there was a placer and they were able to find the mine because of it, and that the Apaches covered it and there's a rock on it. So if you want to go out and you're on the Bush Highway and you see the Hughes Ranch turnoff and you go to the end and you park down there by the Wash Creek and you start following it up and you come to the fork where the old well is and the windmill, you just go the southerly to the right and you start following that around. Who knows if the diggings are there, but somewhere along there within 4 to 5 miles there should be a bench, and there should be, who knows if even the remains of the Palo Verde tree are there at that time, because let's face it, when Artabo went up there and there was the giant Palo Verde tree, he probably was in his teens. So let's say he was 15 years old. So it had to happen 70 years before when he was last there. But he stated that was there, and 20 feet to the southwest, you should find a large boulder. And if you can dig under that boulder or get that boulder moved out of the way, there should be an open pit, a tunnel going into a pit, and that should be a rich mine of some sort. Interesting. I would find it interesting if someone just went out there and plastered that area and found some samples and said, yeah, there is good float up here, because that would be an interesting tale unto itself. So there's the shoemaker, Abbott, Thomas, or Atuba tale, and it has a lot of different moving elements, but they do kind of fit together as different pieces of the puzzle. A very interesting area. I haven't been out there. I'm sure there's other people who have heard of the story and still to this day kind of search that area. Be respectful when you go onto private ranch land like that and passing through. Make your intentions known that you're just out looking at something. There's a story. Sometimes those people, if you're cool enough, will tell you some really good stuff about the story. But it would be interesting to find out if that gold float is still out there. And after all these years, if 100 and some odd years later there is still a good amount of gold float out there, it means that mine or that pocket is still out there. So there you go. Hope everyone enjoyed this. Hope everybody's getting used to this after we've done this. Have to get used to it. Can't fix it. Can't paste it, tape it back on. So there we go. Hope everybody's having a wonderful weekend. I hope everybody's having a great week moving forward. And we'll catch you again on the live coming up. Until then, always remember, I'm Wayne Tuttle. You're not. And this is Chasing Legends.